April 28, 1988, 24,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean. A Boeing 737 is on a routine 35-minute island hop from Hilo to Honolulu. At 13:48, a passenger in row 5 looks up. The roof is gone. Not damaged, not cracked. Gone. 18 feet of it torn away in an instant. One flight attendant is swept out of the aircraft immediately. The others hold on. The pilots have no idea what has happened behind them. They know only that something has gone catastrophically wrong and that they are still in the air. What happened next and how it was allowed to happen at all changed aviation safety permanently.
Aloha Airlines Flight 243 was what the industry calls a short-haul operation, brief, frequent flights between the Hawaiian Islands. On April 28, 1988, the aircraft operating the flight had already completed 3 inter-island segments that morning before departing Hilo at 13:25 HST, bound for Honolulu with 90 passengers and 5 crew members on board. The aircraft was a Boeing 737-200, registration M73711, named Queen Liliuokalani. It was 19 years old. More significantly, it had accumulated 89,680 flight cycles, takeoff and landing cycles, each one pressurizing and depressurizing the fuselage, making it the second highest cycle 737 in the world at that time. It had been designed for a service life of 75,000 cycles. It had flown nearly 15,000 beyond that. In command was 44-year-old Captain Robert Schornsteimer with 8,500 flight hours, 6,700 of which in 737s. His first officer was 36-year-old Mimi Tompkins, also highly experienced in the type. The takeoff from Hilo was normal. The climb was normal. At 13:48, as the aircraft leveled at 24,000 feet, nothing was normal anymore.
To understand what happened at 24,000 feet, you need to understand something about how aircraft fuselages are built and what happens to them over time. A commercial aircraft fuselage is not a single piece of metal. It is made of overlapping panels of aluminum skin, joined together at longitudinal seams called lap joints. Each panel overlaps the next by about 3 inches, bonded with adhesive and secured with rivets. Every time an aircraft takes off, the cabin is pressurized to a comfortable altitude, typically the equivalent of 8,000 feet. Every time it lands, it depressurizes. This cycle of pressurization and depressurization puts stress on the fuselage, specifically on the lap joints, which expand and contract slightly with each cycle. Over tens of thousands of cycles, microscopic cracks can develop at the rivet holes in these joints. This is called metal fatigue. The design of the 737's fuselage included a feature called tear straps, built-in crack arresters that were supposed to prevent any crack from growing beyond a small area, ensuring a controlled decompression rather than a catastrophic failure. The tear straps worked unless the adhesive bonding in the lap joint had failed. When the bond failed, the tear straps failed with it.
N73711 had been operating in Hawaii for 19 years. The salt air and humidity of the Hawaiian environment accelerated the corrosion of the lap joints. The cold bonding adhesive had degraded. Investigators would later find that multiple tiny cracks at adjacent rivet holes had grown until they linked up, a phenomenon known as multiple site damage, creating a single long crack that the tear straps could no longer stop. A passenger named Gail Yamamoto noticed a crack in the fuselage as she boarded the aircraft in Hilo. She did not tell anyone. At 13:48, the crack reached critical length. The fuselage skin failed explosively.
The decompression was instantaneous. 18 feet of the upper fuselage, from just behind the cockpit to the front wing area, tore away. The entire top half of the cabin forward section was open to the sky. Flight attendant Clarabelle Lansing, who had been standing at row 5, was swept out of the aircraft immediately. She was never found. The other 2 flight attendants were severely injured but held on.
Passengers in the exposed section were subjected to hurricane-force winds and extreme cold. In the cockpit, the noise was indescribable. Captain Schornsteimer and First Officer Tompkins felt a sudden explosive decompression and a violent jolt. The cockpit door blew open. Through it, they could see the sky where the ceiling should have been. Tompkins immediately donned her oxygen mask and began an emergency descent. Schornsteimer attempted to contact ATC. The structural damage had disrupted communications. The aircraft was remarkably still flying. The wings were intact. The two remaining engines were functioning. The empennage, the tail, was damaged but holding. The landing gear, when they later attempted to lower it, extended by gravity as the hydraulic system had partially failed. The crew had no checklist for this. No one had written a procedure for flying a convertible 737. Tompkins flew it anyway.
Honolulu was too far. Schornsteimer declared an emergency and diverted to Kahului Airport on the island of Maui, 23 nautical miles away. The approach was made without flaps. The flap system was damaged. The speed was higher than normal. The crew did not know the full extent of the structural damage behind them. They did not know how much of the aircraft was still there. At 13:55, 7 minutes after the decompression, Aloha Airlines Flight 243 touched down at Kahului Airport. The nose gear held. The aircraft stopped on the runway. Maui had 2 ambulances. Passengers were transported to the hospital in tourist vans. Tour guides who had previously worked as paramedics set up a triage on the runway. Of the 95 people on board, 1, Clarabelle Lansing, did not survive. 65 passengers and crew were injured, 8 seriously. Every person who landed with the aircraft walked away.
The NTSB investigation, completed in June 1989, identified the cause with precision. The probable cause was the failure of Aloha Airlines maintenance program to detect the presence of significant disbonding and fatigue damage in the fuselage lap joint at stringer S10L. But the NTSB went further than the maintenance program. It identified a chain of failures that extended beyond Aloha Airlines. The FAA had issued an airworthiness directive in 1987 requiring inspection of specific lap joints on aging 737s, but it required only 2 of the many affected stringers to be inspected. Boeing's own service bulletin had identified 6 stringer locations requiring inspection. The FAA had mandated only 2. The stringer that failed, S10L, was not one of the 2. Aloha's maintenance culture had, over time, normalized a deteriorated condition. When investigators examined Aloha's other 737s after the accident, they found evidence of corrosion and skin bulging, what engineers call pillowing, on multiple aircraft. None of it had been flagged as significant. Inspectors had received as little as 2 hours of training in structural inspection. Night inspections in poor lighting made crack detection even more difficult.
A passenger had seen a crack and said nothing. An inspector had missed the same crack. A maintenance program had not been designed to find it. A regulator had not required the inspection that would have caught it. Every link in the chain failed. Aloha 243 permanently changed how the aviation industry thinks about aging aircraft. The concept of multiple site damage, the linking of small fatigue cracks at adjacent rivet holes into a single catastrophic failure, was not part of standard maintenance thinking before 1988. After Aloha, it became a fundamental part of structural engineering and inspection programs for commercial aircraft worldwide. The FAA launched the National Aging Aircraft Research Program, which established new requirements for the inspection and modification of aircraft with high cycle counts. Mandatory inspection intervals for fuselage lap joints were dramatically shortened. The FAA issued new airworthiness directives covering all the stringer locations Boeing's service bulletin had identified, not just 2 of them. The U.S. Congress passed the Aviation Safety Research Act of 1988 in the immediate aftermath, strengthening the FAA's oversight authority and mandating research into improved inspection techniques.
Aloha 243 is unusual among the accidents in this series. The aircraft landed. Almost everyone survived. The crew performed under conditions no one had trained them for, without error. But 89,680 cycles had been allowed to accumulate on an aircraft designed for 75,000. A passenger had seen a crack and said nothing. An inspector had missed it. A regulator had not required the inspection that would have found it. An airline's maintenance culture had accepted deterioration as normal. The structure held long enough for Mimi Tompkins to land it, but it should never have reached 89,680 cycles in that condition. The accident was survivable. The conditions that created it were not inevitable. That distinction between what is survivable and what is preventable is at the heart of everything aviation safety does. The goal is never to be better at surviving. The goal is to not be in the situation at all. If you want to understand how aviation keeps building that case one investigation at a time, subscribe. We'll be back next week.